Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Martin. I'm with Emcee. I'm here this morning representing your chamber board, and I'm your advocacy chair for 2019. I want to thank you all for being here. What a great turnout. Just some logistics in case anyone got here a little bit late. There's coffee and water to your left, my right. Also some health-conscious donuts are over there. And then restrooms, there's doors, again, to your left, my right. Just go out there and go down the hallway. Feel free to get up and go anytime. But thank you to all of you for being here. This is a little bit new to the chamber. Normally we do at least one or two legislative forums, I guess for lack of a better term, during the legislative session, but with this being a short session and a lot of moving parts, in the interest of time, since we know you guys are very busy, we decided to kind of do a legislative recap. So with that, I know you guys will probably get to it, but at everybody's seat, there are the community priority cards, front and back, of the things that we have been advocating for on behalf of Owensboro and Davis County. But with that, I wanted to give all of you a chance to maybe kind of recap this past legislative session, if you want to. Not everybody has to talk, but give you that opportunity. And then after that, you should have note cards and pins at every place setting. Feel free to ask questions. I'm getting older, so please write big. I'll read them and let you guys all have an opportunity to respond. So Matt, you want to start?
Sure, I'll take it from here. So, well, thank you all for coming out here on this Thursday morning at 7:30 in the morning. I know everybody's got busy days ahead of them, but you know, being a recap of the session, with over 200 bills passed this session, it feels like we've been out of there for over a month now, but just been a few weeks. So I'm just going to kind of hit some high notes, some things in the Senate and some things that the House and Senate work together that kind of impacted it. I see a lot of shirt tags in here with bankers. How many bankers we have in the room? Raise your hand. So in the House cleanup bill for the tax thing, we also got rid of the tax on the nonprofits, which was kind of a cleanup bill from 2018. The bank franchise tax now is gone. Banks now be paying corporate income tax, which is kind of going to give them a competitive edge with out-of-state banks. That's going to help our local community banks and stuff here in Kentucky. Our Section 179 for the agriculture and small business sectors, for if you're buying a backhoe, a skid steer, a planter, a tractor, those kind of things, we raised that limit 4 times higher than what it was. It's at $100,000 now, so that's going to be big for the small business community here in the community. We've done several things with the education and requirements and some stuff like that that's going to kind of help with workforce development. Laura Ruth here, she drove to Frankfort several times to work with me on Senate Bill 9, the fetal heartbeat bill to eliminate abortion after the detection of a heartbeat. Laura, we thank you for your dedication and help on that issue as well. And so there was several things amongst those 200 bills that are passed, and I know there's 3 others here that are going to kind of touch on them, so I don't want to hit on all of them. I'm going to yield to Suzanne, let her talk about a few of them now.
Good morning. I'd like all the class from Leadership in Owensboro, if you all would stand up so we can see all the group that's here today from that class. Wow. Thank you all. I know you all have had a very exciting class so far and made some new friends and maybe a few frenemies along the way and things like that. But May 2nd, I think, is your graduation, so congratulations ahead of time for that. Just as a sidebar note, John Brighton, here he is at the camera. He was in Leadership in Owensboro with me just a few years ago, right, before either one of us had any gray hair. So just to kind of get an idea of how relationships are built and make sure that you use those relationships moving forward. So it's good opportunities for everybody. As far as a recap, the main thing that I'd like for us to do today is answer a lot of questions. This was a short session, but yet there was a lot of legislation that moved this session. People say, was it successful? Absolutely. There were a lot of things that were changed, and we're moving in a good direction. The state is the lowest unemployment rate, which is amazing. Economy's moving well. I think the safety of children, school safety, I know Representative Lewis will probably touch on the school safety bill a little bit, kind of talk, and I was in a school this past week, and they've already started implementing some of the items to try to make their children safer and everything as we move forward on that. There's so many different bills. There is not enough time today or this week for us to go through each and every one of them to explain them. So I know you all have very, very specific items that you want to discuss, and I'd rather us go ahead and move on to questions as soon as we can so that we know what you all want to know about. So thanks for having us.
Okay. I'm excited to be here today, and I want to congratulate my colleagues that are here with me. Representative Castlen, Senator Castlen has moved up to that position, and of course, Representative Miles is a member of leadership now, and it's been, I don't know, a long, long time since we've had someone from this area that's a member of leadership. So I'm really excited to work with her, and we do have a voice in that leadership team. Scott Lewis he's one of our newest members here, and so I know that he'll have a lot that he wants to talk about. I don't want to, as Representative Miles said, I'd rather talk about and answer some questions that you may have. But just as she said, this was a successful session. It was a short session, and when we operate under constraints of that, there's not a lot of time to get a lot passed. Also, when you have a short session, if you open up the budget at all, do any budget bills or revenue bills, it takes a 3/5 majority in both chambers to pass that. So when you look at those types of things, we did some good things, I think. We kind of came back and I guess tweaked or took care of some issues that we had created last year in with the tax package, and we solved some problems there. It's already been mentioned, the thing that we did for banks. We did some school safety stuff, as always has already been mentioned. And so when you consider that we didn't have a lot of time, we really did get a lot passed. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to.
Thank you. I'm Scott Lewis. I represent all of Ohio County and East Davis County, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. I don't get over this way as much, but I sure appreciate any time I get invited. And for me, being new, it was fast and furious and just learning the ropes, and I think I'll be much more prepared for the next session. But I was sort of thrown in the fire a little bit because before the session started, I was elected to be put on the Pension Reform Committee, so.
You were chosen.
Chosen, okay. Well, somehow I get the short end of the straw on that deal, but anyway, there are strides being made there, and I tell you folks, it's a tough issue because we have all these different retirement systems, and each one's different. As most of you all are aware, teachers don't pay in, nor can they draw Social Security. So that's something in itself right there to try to figure out things that we can do moving forward, and we're certainly going to work on that. The school safety bill that they talked about was the #1 bill from both the Senate and the House, and it's a starting point. It's not a finished piece of legislation, but it starts the process, and it puts things like more counselors, more mental health professionals, more SROs or sheriff's departments or whatever, school resource officers in the buildings to make them safer. In our area, we're very blessed with good schools. We really are. In this whole region right here, we have some of the top performing schools, and I would say that our schools in this area are as safe as anywhere. That doesn't mean something can't happen. It can happen anywhere. But most of our schools, when you go to them now, you're buzzed in. The doors are locked at 8 o'clock or whatever. So I feel good about that. But that'll be a bill that has to be worked on each session and tweaked. But again, thank you for having us, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you. Bear with me, this one's kind of a long one, but you'll get the gist of it pretty quick. Our local elected officials and chamber have been expressing the need for more local taxing options in order to alleviate rising taxes on businesses and workers. Our governor has said that we need to express this directly to our local delegation. do you support allowing our local government of Owensboro having the same taxing authority as smaller communities?
Me first?
Please.
Yeah, all right. So I think you're going to see, when we say comprehensive tax reform, you know, that's kind of a broad area. And I think you're seeing every year that we go there, we're making a step towards consumption-based tax. And what he's referring to is a consumption-based tax that local governments would have the opportunity to impose at different levels of small business, different levels of citizens. And so I think you're probably going to see that as a part of it. But one of the things that I'd like to bring up from the state, because we always get it pitched back on us to the state for revenue. And I think here just a few weeks ago, we've seen an opportunity for our local communities to take revenue in from OZ Tyler with these rick houses. And now they're located in Ohio County, you know, which is good for Scott and good for our area. But I think that was an opportunity for our local communities also to get some tax money from that. And because of some regulations that we had here locally, they were forced to go to a different county. So I think if we're going to be asked for those kind of things, I think those conversations need to be opened and on the table as well. Because if we're going to be business friendly, we got to be business friendly for all. So.
Well, I'll piggyback on that just a little bit as far as the tax modernization. We're calling it, as far as the ones working with A&R, is 2.0. Tax modernization 2.0 is one of the main things. Trying to look at all the tax credits. There's many tax credits. I received a book, and it's pretty good depth of all the different items. A lot of those are out of date. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed to modernize those so that we get to, 2020 and beyond to prepare for that. A lot of the things, sometimes we don't like the regulations that we have locally, but a lot of times there's a reason for every one of those items that have gone into place. So we kind of need to readjust and look at those and work with our elected officials locally to come up with solutions for that. I think that there are efforts in the works for doing that. Patience is not always the greatest attribute that we all have, and I think that's a struggle with many items. But we do need to be careful whenever we talk about changing a lot of things for local rural. We do have some communities that have not made the best choices with the funding that they have that have come in, and then a lot of times it falls back on the state to come up with those solutions. Currently, as many of you all know, the quasi-government, we passed a bill to help with the pensions with that. Last year we froze it. Moving forward, we were coming up with a solution for several of them to be able to buy out of the system, which the universities had brought that solution to us. One of the main problems with that, we've got a lot of organizations that cannot buy out or something to that effect. The governor did veto that bill. I was very disappointed he vetoed that bill because that's going to help a lot of health departments and things like that. Locally, our health department is doing better than a lot of others across the state, but in the event that those health departments close across the state, that's going to come back on the state to provide those services. And that's a financial bind that we may be in at the state level of trying to figure out how to fund a lot of the things that are necessities for our community. I know that they're not pretty and they don't appear to be economic development, but at the end of the day, if our people aren't cared for, then that becomes a huge issue and a huge expense that we have to redirect. I think that's basically where we are right now in the pension system. It has been unfunded for so many years. We're to a point now, we're having to redirect our priorities to make sure that the unfunded liabilities are paid for and everything that's been promised has been fulfilled. So every time that we do a lot of the things that we, shift the revenues from one area to another area, or the priorities or lack of revenues for that matter. Home rule as a whole, I'm very supportive of the locals, as many local decisions as possible to be made at the local level. I do think that we need to encourage that, but we also need to help people have some safeguards to make sure that we don't put them in a bind. So.
Okay, let me just say, as someone who started as a mayor about 30, I'm not going to tell you how long ago, I understand as someone who, was responsible for all the services and things that we provided in a city. I truly understand the need here. I think everyone in the General Assembly recognizes that local governments need more options in ways to raise revenue, to provide the services that people have come to expect and that people deserve out there. And so we do need to look at that, but I agree that that's something that's probably going to be part of the overall comprehensive tax reform thing that I truly believe we will have in the next several months. So it may not be this year, but I think we will do that. And so I think that what we need is you to come with us with the ideas and things that you would like to see us do.
Just to touch on a few things, I would be very supportive of home rule, and I've seen some of the things that smaller cities have been able to do because of that. One prime example is an area where I live, Beaver Dam. If you want to see an example of home rule and some tax, using tax money a certain way, you see our amphitheater. By the way, the Temptations are coming. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Our downtown is growing. We have a Beef O'Brady's that just located, biggest franchise we've ever had in Ohio County. And, you know, some of the things Suzanne and Matt have said is true. You know, we just need to make sure when we pass something like that there are safeguards. But, again, I think things, you know, the people that live in the local areas need to have say on what their community is going to look like. So I'd be very supportive of that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I know no one's here to listen to me, but can folks in the back hear okay? We're trying to get those fans turned off or turned down. Can you hear the delegation okay? All right, so.
We'll speak up.
We'll talk louder then.
Sorry about that. Representative Lewis, I'm going to start with you this time.
All right.
You mentioned being on the pension committee, and I know that the governor had vetoed a bill kind of at the end of the session and has indicated there's going to be a special session related to pension reform. If you wouldn't mind starting, whoever else wants to weigh in, what do you foresee as being the outcomes of that special session?
Well, I don't know there will be a special session unless leadership of the House and the Senate and the governor can be on the same page before we get there, because, and I've not been through a special session, but I don't know that there's enough time once you get there, if you don't have anything, a starting point, that you could ever get anything worked out. There's parts of 358 that I think all of us up here like, and there's parts of it that we don't like. It's a complicated issue, and you know, some of these up here may disagree with me on this, but you know, I'm not for everybody opting out. I'd like to help them, and I'd like for the rates to be a certain place where more people could stay in. I don't think people opting out is going to help our system by less money coming into it. I think we went from one extreme to the opposite extreme on the rates. You know, we say we're going from 40-something% to 80, I forget the percent, 83 or 84. Again, I think there's somewhere in the middle there that would be a good rate, and I think we need to get another set of actuarial eyes to look at that. And you know, I want everybody to stay in, and I think the employees of these health departments and all that want that also. But for everything that we had to work with at the last minute, I think you see why that was probably passed. We had on one end the universities and the quasi-governments, rape crisis centers and all that, begging us to vote so that that rate wouldn't go to 80-something% where they had to lay off people. So again, I think there needs to be another comprehensive look at that bill, and hopefully it could be tweaked and be better for everybody. Thank you.
Let me say, I agree with Representative Lewis that there will not be a special session before July 1st talking about the overall pension problem. I do think that the issue that he vetoed was with the quasi-government, entities. I think that there will be probably a special session with the bill to address that. The difference is that we had a compromise with the Senate, and we came up with the bill and we passed it. The governor vetoed it, and we didn't have the chance to override it. So I think that it's incumbent on the governor now to take the lead and get the parties together and come up with something on that. But I think we have to understand how serious this pension situation is. And not only for these quasi-government agencies and in CERS, the same thing is happening to the state. You know, this next year, we're going to have to put in, for every dollar we pay an employee in salaries, we're going to have to put in 80-something cents into their pension system. And we're about to the point where it won't be another year or two. That's going to be over 100%. So, you know, for every dollar you're going to pay someone in salary, what's going to happen is you're going to be paying more than $1 that goes into their pension system. And what's happening with these quasis is that what they're going to do is they're going to start laying off people, privatizing more services and those types of things, reducing their liabilities, and so that affects the system as well as far as the amount of money that's coming into the system. So it's a serious, serious problem. We're going to have to deal with it, and I think we need to start now. But again, I look to the governor for leadership in helping us come to a solution for the whole thing, but specifically the most serious need right now for local governments, health departments, universities, and these other quasis is the bill that we just passed and was vetoed.
And I'll touch on it briefly. Basically, he has already referenced the main thing that I've advocated for since the veto is make sure that the governor brings us something ahead of time and make sure that all parties are in agreement before he ever makes the first call of that special session. I think it would be a really big mistake to expect us to come in and, you know, have the mindset that you just walk in the door and you sit down and you come up with a solution and walk out the door. There was a lot of work that went into the bill that we passed that took place over not only the session but prior to the session of those conversations. Previously, the ask was to come up with a solution and come back to us with something that you all would work with. The universities did that, and that's whenever the universities came back to us. I know Dr. Williams, I think I saw him earlier in the back of the room. You know, they came to us and said, this is the best case scenario that we could ask for as far as some options. And that's what the end result was. There was a compromise between the House and the Senate as far as where we got to. You know, there were some groups that just wanted another freeze. Well, every freeze that we did increased the liability. And so this was kind of the first step to come for, you know, working toward a solution. I know Representative Liz referenced wanting to make sure he didn't think that giving anyone the opportunity to opt out was a possibility of making things better. But the reality is, if any of the universities opted out, that was going to be a flush of money. If they actually did a buyout, that would have been a flush of money into the system that would have helped the unfunded liability, in my opinion. And so whenever we kind of look at some of those items, you know, several of us have different opinions and we're not sure exactly what the end result is going to be. But until we actually have a product in front of us that we feel as if we can pass, I strongly discourage the governor to call a special session until we actually have something that we can do. Because as you well know, every time we call a special session, time is money. And that is taxpayer dollars that we're spending. And so that's been my stance on it.
Sure. I'm just going to say a few words here. So the special session can only be called by the governor. 3 co-equal branches of government, the executive branch, the Senate, the House of Representatives. The Senate and the House passed a bill that there was agreements on. It was in a conference committee. We put a substitute on it in the Senate from the House version, and then it went back and they worked it out in a conference committee, and both both sides of the Senate and the House were able to compromise and come up with a solution they could live with. So the governor's the only one who can call a special session, and he has to present the bill to the House and the Senate. So when he shows us what he's going to have, we'll look at it and decide the direction to go.
Thank you. You already talked about pensions. Representative Gooch touched on tax reform. Senator Castlen, we'll start with you. What do you consider the most pressing issue facing state government?
You know, the most pressing issue, there's 2 big ones at the top, and someone always says the most, but, you know, tax reform is something that we got to continue to finish. We've started down the road of consumption-based tax reform, and we've got to get all the way to the end. We've got to get rid of income tax and lean all the way towards consumption. I think that's going to bring us into an equal playing field with surrounding states, and I think that's going to be an issue that you're going to see the House and the Senate work very closely on over the next biennial budget. And And, through all this, we got to make sure that we continue to work on our pension system. That's that financial crisis that's looming over Kentucky right now that's affecting every one of us in this room. As taxpayers, as individuals who are receiving a pension, it's a big issue. But if you look at our infrastructure in Kentucky, and you look at our road plan, and you look at the funding from our gas tax, and you look at the toll tax credits, we're going to lose those. And we're going to be about $100 to $120 million short in our toll tax credits that we're receiving from the federal government. And so, that's something that we have to address. Every single one of us in this room use our highways, our bridges, our waterways, our rail services to go to work, take our kids to school, transport your products and goods. And I think it's something that affects every citizen. And if we don't start looking over the horizon to invest in our infrastructure going forward, it's going to hurt us on several fronts. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we need to tackle this upcoming session.
Probably, I'll agree with Senator Castlen that, tax reform, pensions, and infrastructure are probably the top three. Of course, public safety always continues. And that's something that we always need to make sure that we, the public safety and things like that, so.
Yeah, I think, it's tough to come up with one thing that's the most pressing issue, but I think one of the things we can agree upon is that ultimately, whether it's the opioid epidemic that's certainly destroying our state and our economy, it's infrastructure, it's, we're putting more money in investments in education and workforce development, but all of that is done if you have a tax system that's not antiquated, that's fair, that's equitable. And so I think that all of these issues that we could all say are the most pressing issues, the way to solve those is to ultimately redo our tax structure.
And I'll just comment one thing, and I agree with Jim. I think, if we have a competitive tax structure, it will help these other issues tremendously. So I agree. I think tax reform is going to be very, very important next session.
Great. Just a reminder for if anyone does have any questions, there should be note cards and pens. Please don't be shy. Ask, write down your question, pass it to your left, my right, and we try to work it in. But we do have a question from Leadership Owensboro class, so thank you for whoever took the time to write this out. What are your thoughts on, I apologize.
It's about redistricting, taking the redistricting process.
All right, sorry.
out of-
What are your thoughts on taking the redistricting process out of the state legislature and allowing a bipartisan independent council to draw district lines, which would reduce the risk of gerrymandering to take place? Anybody want to take the lead on this?
I'll take it, but that's not really where I thought the question was going. I really thought the question was going more towards the census. We do have a census coming up, and I'm going to do my commercial for that right now, how important that is. I don't think that everyone understands, the smaller communities especially understand it, because every time that they have a fluctuation, if they have a loss in residents in their area whenever the census comes up, that kind of drops them below certain levels to be different classes of cities and things like that, which also indirectly, but the end result is cuts back on the financial money provided from the state and the federal for that, especially the federal. So make sure that whenever you get your census, fill that out. We need to make sure that every single body is counted to make sure that we have the funding that is coming to our state for those individuals to provide those services. As far as taking it out of the hands of the legislator, I don't know what the right answer to that is, but whenever you tell me that you're going to take something out of one area and put it into a bipartisan, non-biased opinion, I guess I look at that whenever I look at our judicial system. Not that all of them are partisan, but we do recognize that there is partisanship no matter where you put it. And as far as being responsible, I think the main thing is to make sure that we're responsible and diligent whenever it comes down to the redistricting and how those lines work, and to be responsible in that. The way that my area is set up right now, I have all of Union County, a tiny bit of Henderson to connect it to the largest part of my district in Davis County. and I have more votes in my district in Davis County, residence-wise, than I do. So if you actually look at mine, it looks like a soup ladle. Is that responsible? No, it is not responsible geographically to put anyone in that situation, because my district right now is a further drive for me for, as a House member than Senator Castlen's is as a senator. So just kind of put that in perspective. So as far as the gerrymandering, I don't know if you can ever undo that mindset, but as far as a legislator, I feel like we need to be very responsible moving forward. And I think if you have the right people at the table, the nonpartisanship of being responsible is the top priority. So I think the people you have sitting at the table is the most important. I don't think that you can completely take politics out of it.
I'm just going to kind of bump just right off of what Suzanne said, because I thought you all were going kind of down the census path as well. But just to kind of talk about those co-equal branches of government one more time. You know, and then you look at it from the federal, from the state to local government. You know, state's kind of that middle of the road. As the representatives with 100 of them, you know, they represent a pretty large area, but they have an election every 2 years. They're extremely close to the people, and the people go to the ballot box and they elect the representative they want to represent their voice in Frankfort. The Senate, there's 38 of us. We have an election every 4 years. And so when you look at the House and the Senate and the executive branch, who have to all agree upon this particular redistricting every 10 years, I think it is a pretty fair shake, because you look from Republicans to Democrats, the House is flipped, the Senate's flipped, the governor's flipped, and so, you know, every 10 years, I think the system we've had set up for a long time is working. There's no doubt there is politics in it. I've never had the opportunity to redistrict. I've heard stories about it, but I think it would also happen the same on a local level or a federal level as well.
Yeah, let me just say that, you know, I understand that people feel like if we take it away from the legislature, it would be less partisan, less political, and I understand that. But let me say, whether it's the legislature drawing the boundaries or some group out there, or even the judiciary, you cannot in the House, you cannot redistrict and actually follow the Constitution of Kentucky. The Constitution says that you can't add more than 2 counties together to form a district. It also says that you can't split a small county that's less than the size of what a district would be. Well, you cannot do that, and so what we have, the courts have ruled is that, you know, I think the maximum that, the smallest number of counties that are small that you can split is 2. So, you know, that's a real serious issue, regardless of who's drawing the boundaries. It's very difficult, you know, because of one man, one vote, which was, I guess, a Supreme Court decision. You know, it's not fair for one person to go to Frankfort and have one vote and represent 50,000 people, and someone else to go to Frankfort representing 25,000 people and have an equal vote. And so that's why these districts now have, you know, 3 or 4 counties, and you're splitting large counties like Davis up, simply because you can't split the constitutionally, the small counties. But let me just say that there are other issues as well. You know, we're a very diverse state, and we have lots of different economic interests and other things. And what happens is that I'm not so sure that a small committee is going to truly understand all of those differences that we may have. And there's a divide often between urban and rural, and I think that's getting to be larger than the Democrat-Republican issue, the divide is. And so I think that at least having 138 members of the General Assembly doing that, we are making sure that all areas of the state are represented. And so I would be more in favor of continuing, and I've been parts of about 3 redistrictings, and some of them kind of hurt me as far as my district, but I think we probably need to leave it like it is.
Lewis, anything to add to that?
Being last, I think they have covered that issue.
That's the one thing about going last. But anyway, when you look at this community priorities list, which is, you know, kind of a joint effort between city, county, chamber, EDC, and you look at the check marks, you know, on this card, it's pretty impressive what we here in Owensboro have been able to accomplish. And one side's transportation projects, the other side's capital and legislative. And, you know, we've already kind of talked a little bit about home rule, but what about a new judicial center? can you kind of talk about that process and how likely it would be for us to get a new one?
I'll start. So, you know, the first I'd kind of heard of it was when we met with the governor, when several members of the leadership and the chamber had come up, and so I haven't really given it much thought. I mean, I know the price tag of it is probably going to be pretty significant at this time, and so, you know, I would just want to have a better understanding of why we need another one right now and why we feel like it's important in the community. So at this time, I'm kind of middle of the road until I have a better understanding of why we feel like we need another one.
Probably my priority with the items, you know, that we have on here, the second family court judge, I think it's important that we move forward on making sure that that's a permanent situation. That's one of the items that I think continues to work towards. I'd spoken with the family court judges recently, and their workloads are amazing for our size of community. And I think that, you know, space, I know that they're doing some reconstruction things to make that more accommodating for them. But as far as the actual judicial center, I don't think that we've really, you know, that hasn't been the forefront as much as many of the other things. Want to compliment the chamber and all of the area that's worked so hard on the I-165. I think that we've moved forward in that in a very quick way. I know some of you all think that we've been preaching it for a long time, but it is just so exciting to be able to see those signs go up and how important that is for our community. But with that being said, I mean, the next phone call I made after I got the word the signs were going up, I said, okay, what about our spur on Audubon Parkway? When do we get that? So, you know, that's the main thing as far as infrastructure that I focus a lot on to make sure everything that we can do moving forward on that, so.
Okay, you know, that's a tough one. I want to make sure that you have a judicial center that's meeting the needs of the folks. I know in my other counties, we've built new courthouses, I guess, or new additions. Webster County and McLean County, two small counties that definitely had some serious needs there. They were very modest in the additions that they made, and I appreciate that. We did see some instances across the state where there was some Taj Mahals built that probably were way were overpriced. We need to prevent that from happening, because many times you can't even pay and almost keep the lights on with some of these facilities that have been built. And let me just say that I'm a little bit concerned about, you know, we have everyone, a lot of people that, you know, get a speeding ticket or whatever, and they've got a $20 ticket, and they're paying $160, $180 in court cost. And a lot of that's from some other things that, you know, where it's easy to earmark something and say, well, you know, we're going to pay for this or whatever by raising, you know, the fees on the court costs. Well, everyone who uses the court system are not criminals. You know, we can all do something, charged with whatever. And I just want to make sure that we are very, I guess, at least we understand that we're really putting a burden on a lot of people with some of these really high court costs that we currently have.
Representative Lewis, anything to add?
Well, just, you know, if this community thinks that is one of their top priorities, obviously you all need to keep pushing for that. If that, you know, is one of your things that you think will benefit your community the most, then you need to leave that on here and keep working for that. I'm not familiar enough to really be able to comment on any of that, but I do feel the local people know their priorities better than us. So again, that's all I have to add on that.
Great. I know we're getting close to the hour. Appreciate you guys again being here. Appreciate all you being here. But we'll start with Representative Lewis and work back towards Senator Castlen. Is there anything that you didn't get a chance to say today that you wanted to say? Just kind of in closing, anything you want to mention to wrap up? Any pain points? Any things you're passionate about?
Well, you know, I ran, as most of you all know, some of you may not. I've been in the field of education for 33 years, superintendent for 13 years, and a lot of talk in Frankfort right now is geared to things that I'm familiar with. So hopefully going forward, maybe I can be an asset to our caucus on ideas or how to fix things. And, I want to be a part of the solution. One of the things I heard when I was running was, well, you all want to complain, but you all never have any solutions. So, I want to be part of whatever we come up with to help move the state forward in education, tax reform, or whatever it would be. So, if any of you all ever need anything, feel free to call me. I represent, like I said, East Davis County, but I really represent everybody. So if you have any ideas that you would like me to work on in any different area, I serve on Health and Family Services, the Education Committee, Military Veterans Affairs, and now I'm on this public pension committee. So any of those areas will be where I spend most of my time in Frankfort. But I just want to thank you all for allowing me to be here. I always like to come to Davis County. I get to a lot of things in Ohio County because I represent that whole county, but I really do enjoy coming over here and getting to meet different people. So thank you very much.
I probably going to sound like a broken record here. I'm every time I get before the group, I'm always talking about reliable, affordable energy, electricity, and I think it's significant right now with the conversation that's going on in Washington. We just had a very serious, I guess, polar vortex that happened this last winter, and let me just say that the baseload generators out there that have a fuel source on site, whether it be coal or nuclear or whatever, they provided the majority of the power that helped us through that serious problem. And actually, even though coal was about 30% of the mix today, during that really cold weather, they provided over 50%. And then you take natural gas was about 28 or 29, 30%. Nuclear was in there somewhere about, I think, 18 or whatever. And, so that means if you add those together, you're talking about, about 95% of the energy that was needed was coming from baseload generation. And, there are people out there right now that are making proposals that talk about doing away with those, natural gas and coal are both fossil fuels, and they're talking about doing away with those in a very short period of time, and they're wanting to replace that with sources for electricity that really aren't, they're not things that are there all the time. They're not available all the time, certainly not affordable, and so we have to always keep in mind that our economy depends on electricity that will attract employers, that provide jobs, and then we also want to make sure that we don't hurt the people on fixed incomes, the people that are retired or whatever. And we did pass a good bill this year. It was called the net metering bill, where we're trying to make sure that people who cannot afford rooftop solar are not going to pay any extra for those that can. So energy is always going to be a very important issue, and let's not forget that, and let's not make it emotional. Let's look at, okay, what is practical, what can be done, and that conversation is not happening in Washington.
Thank you.
And I'll kind of, along those same lines, basically we want to thank you all for having us today, but also thank you for your support and your thoughts and prayers and the messages that you all send out to us. The most important thing that we can do is vote in Frankfort. Part of the conversations of working towards the solutions, Representative Lewis mentioned that. There is no doubt in my mind the people sitting in front of you today want to be a part of the solution. We want to be helpful with the answers, but we also want to make sure that our local voices from home, we talk about home rule. The most important thing that we can do as state legislators is make sure that we vote based upon our homes and our communities. As you will know, not everyone can agree on every issue, so sometimes you have to pick a side one way or another on our votes, but our vote is the most important voice that you all have. And the best way that we enable that is for you all to contact us and let us know where your thoughts are and what are your concerns. I would I will say myself, now these other three may be experts in lots of things, but we depend on the experts that are in the room. We depend on the experts that contact us to make sure that we have as much information as possible to make good decisions based upon those. So we just want to thank you all so much for the work that you all do and continue to do, but make sure that you let your voice, don't assume that we know where you are on an issue. A lot of times we get contacted by different groups, and unfortunately, it appears like the squeaky wheel gets fixed. But the reality is, there's a whole lot of you all that have voices and concerns that unless we actually know what those are, unless you let us have an idea of where you are on the issue, you might think of something that we haven't. So that's one of the main things. Make sure that you reach out to us and let us know. But we just want to thank you all again for having us.
Can I just say that what I think we all agree on is we want to hear from you before we vote and not after we vote.
True. That is helpful.
I want to start, with the Chamber of Commerce here and all the individual groups that are involved in it. I want to say thank you all for what you do. If you look at our economy today and you look at what's happening in Kentucky, we're a shining star in the United States. And that doesn't come from government, that comes from you all. Taking those risks, taking those investments, and employing people, giving people a good job, going to work, working for your families, that's what creates a great community. That's what creates a great state. We as government officials, the only reason that we're here is to create good public policy that creates an environment for you all to be successful. And that's what we're trying to do. And I've been in state government now for 3 years. As a small business owner, one of the biggest reasons I ran was to make sure that that environment, the American dream, the entrepreneurship stayed alive in this country, 'cause that's what built it. And you look, every day you open up a newspaper, there's a new investment, there's a new company coming to town, there's growth amongst a small business. We had Nucor Steel just make that huge announcement in Meade County. Only 2 counties over from my district. And you look at what's going to spin off of that. You look at our local power plants here, they're going to have the opportunity to provide the energy for that big steel mill coming in. You open the newspaper up and you see downtown developments. That stuff is alive because of individuals in this room who are taking those risks. And we thank you all for that, because that's what's going to create a successful state moving forward. So that's my ending words, is thank you all for the risk and the efforts that you all give. Thank you.
But also click online for Owensboro Times too. Not only open the newspaper.
That's right.
I know the messenger's here, but don't forget our online voices too. They're doing a great job.
That's why we say open the newspaper. Open your app or open your paper.
With that, again, thank you to all of you, not only for being here today, but for willing to serve. We know you guys have other commitments, so we greatly appreciate your time in Frankfort and representing us. Thank you to all of you.
Can I throw one more item? This week is the week that we celebrate and thank our 911 centers and dispatch and things like that. We have different things for our law enforcement. I know we have FOP in the room today. Glad to have them. But do be sure our dispatch, whenever we want to call that 911 service, we really appreciate those people. So we want to be sure and thank them this week.
Thanks for that reminder. Again, thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate the great attendance and taking time out of your schedules. I want to thank Candy and the entire chamber staff for organizing this, as well as chamber board members that took time out of their schedules to be here. So with that, have a great day and a great Easter weekend.